Go. Hello and welcome to the More to Life podcast. My name is Elle. I am your host, and today I am joined by the lovely Sinead. Hi, Sinead.
Hello, how are you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. We had a few technical difficulties. There's no surprises there.
No surprises there. Definitely not with me. No surprises there, but we're here.
There's always something. Fabulous. So, Sinead, can you introduce yourself? Because you will do a much better job of it than I will. Who are you? Where you're from? What do you do?
So, hello everybody. I am Sinead Crowe. I am from Galway, west of Ireland, and I am a mum of four. And I work full time in. I'm a clinical nurse specialist in perinatal mental health. So, work with women that are going through the perinatal period, and it's all around obviously mental health. But on the side, I also have a business. I run a business called the Intuitive Eating Hub with my very good friend Shauna Gibson. And I trained a number of years. I trained in intuitive eating counselling and nutritional therapy, and obviously went down the non-diet approach to health and well-being, and wanting to share all of that information and work with clients to achieve I suppose, the freedom and peace that I found through this process, because I myself have a long history of disordered eating behaviours and a really fractured, unhealthy relationship with food from a very young age. So that's me in a nutshell. That's what I do.
Do you know what? As you're just saying that, I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to get the details. I come from somebody else who's had a long history of disordered eating. It's like, it's so nice to talk to other people that have had it and just to share the experiences and be like, oh my gosh, it's so similar to me. And so I love it when people are open about it. I'm just going to pause on the fact that you said you got 4 kids and you work full time and you run your business. Like, that is madness. How old are your children?
Oh, my kids are, well, my eldest is nearly 19 this year, so he's not he's not a kid. He's an adult, fully fledged adult. I managed to raise at least one. So I have one. And then my other 3 then are 11, 7 and 4.
Oh
Yeah.
God, you are
Yeah.
super busy.
Well, it is busy, but look, I always say, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm winging the whole lot of it. That's the reality. Like when
Yeah.
people say, how do you do it all? I say, I'm not doing it all. I am trying my best at whatever I can, and I'm definitely winging it. But I'm also really good at being kind to myself and being
Yes.
really self-compassionate. So I'm not like perfectionistic. I don't try to be perfect in any of these areas. I'm just doing the best that I can. But like it's a challenge, isn't it? Juggling. But I think no matter what you have, whether you're caring for a parent, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're out working and have lots of work stress, I mean, everybody has stuff, don't they?
Yeah.
Everybody.
Everyone
Yeah.
is up against it. Life
Yeah.
now. I feel like in recent years, like I feel like it's turning a little bit now, but we've kind of created this like busy lifestyle that we all have to be busy. And like, so, it doesn't matter whether you're just on your own, but working super long hours, like there's this like sort of like double busy lives that we've all been living. And actually
Yeah.
it's like, say, have that compassion and be like, it's okay to be like, actually, I'm not gonna do today. I'm not gonna do much for the kids. Like yesterday, I
Yeah.
cancelled all my plans with the kids and I sat inside all day and I thought, no, it's fine. I just don't feel up to it.
Oh my God, totally. And I think actually we have to take the being busy off the pedestal,
Yeah.
because it's become kind of this thing that we're all striving to be, that we're kind of seen to be productive and successful if we're busy, that it's seemingly this kind of good thing. Whereas actually I'm doing the opposite. I'm now doing a master's in mindfulness-based interventions.
Oh
So
wow.
I'm nearly finished my first year, obviously going to be going into second year in September. And honestly, my life now is becoming, it's like doing a bit of a 360, where I'm like, I'm on purpose trying to do less. I'm on purpose trying to slow down. I
Yeah.
no longer see it as an achievement to be busy. I now see it that actually doing a lot less and being okay with doing a lot less is kind of like my life mission at the moment. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
working on.
Definitely. And actually, like again, as I was talking now, I'm like, when I was this double busy person, like yes, still busy, but that's because there's lots of things going on. But when I was super double busy and I was kind of thriving off it, my disordered eating was probably also at its worst.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't get to grips with it. I kind of was using it as that tool. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see if this comes up in your life. So if you could take us back to kind of like, not necessarily why you had your disordered eating, but where did it start? Take us through the journey of it.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I'm very open with my whole experience with, I suppose, really it was binge eating that I would have struggled with for about 20 years. So stop me at any point if you have any questions or want to ask anything else, because I'm
Yeah.
like an open book. I'm really passionate about like busting the shame around binge eating. So, like sometimes the getting into the nitty gritty is what people need to hear so that we can
Yeah.
kind of, try to bust the shame that kind of really accompanies binge eating. But I actually thought that my disordered eating relationship with food started when I started slimming clubs like Weight Watchers in my teenage years. But actually, it wasn't until I started delving into the intuitive eating workbook and I started to tease out kind of where the roots were, and when the different beliefs started happening around food and body, etc. And then I realized that actually it all started when I was 10 years old, and I had kind of a pretty serious accident on a school tour. And I was like flown in, or on the Aran Islands out the west of Ireland. And I was flown in a helicopter, and I spent like I spent the summer in hospital, and I had lots of different kind of operations. I had a serious injury to my hand. So I spent the summer in hospital, and like I was the eldest of four girls. So I had three younger sisters, and my mum and dad worked full time. And I spent the summer in hospital, and even now I'm like at 10 years of age. I mean, I have a child that's 10, and like I spent a lot of the time in hospital, like at night on my own. Like I spent all the nights there on my own. Like I didn't have somebody stay with me because, of course, my dad worked kind of long hours away, and my mother had three other kids at home. That's kind of the way it was, I suppose, maybe in the 90s. But so I then learned that actually at that time, in order to self-soothe and kind of like numb out my fear and all of that was going on, my family and friends and I remember I used to get the same thing every day. I'd be brought in a packet of Monster Munch. Anybody that's from Ireland will know, or I don't know where in the world they sell Monster Munch, but a packet
Yes.
of Monster Munch, yeah,
Yeah.
and a packet of Mentos and like a white Magnum ice cream. Like, I mean, honestly, I remember it was like it was yesterday. I would get these same foods all the time, right? So obviously I made a connection at that point between like emotions and how to kind of numb my feelings through eating, right? But I remember at that time, like I was, I would have gained quite a bit of weight. I was in hospital, I was inactive, I was lying in a bed for a lot of the time when I was in hospital at that age. And then I went back to school, obviously that September. And I remember people looking at me a lot and being quite aware of, God, do I look different? Like my body's changed. Obviously I had an accident in my hand, so I suppose maybe they were curious about what that looked like. But I actually, like, it was only when I started doing the work on intuitive eating that I kind of put that all together, and I thought, wow, like that's obviously as an adult as well. Even when I also had the binge eating alongside that, but there was definitely like emotional eating and using food to kind of numb out and distract. But I suppose the binge eating behaviors would have really started when I joined Weight Watchers. And like that, like I don't know if other people can relate, but that first diet that you do, where like it's so easy, right? Like, isn't it, like the adrenaline? You're like, this is a piece of cake. Like, go in, you follow the plan, and within a couple of weeks you've lost a load of weight. And I thought, this is great. Sure, like, I can do this forever. And obviously I couldn't do it forever. And very quickly, when it was like the first whatever weekend it was that I broke the rules, I went way over my points. And it was the first time that I had that, well, feck it. I've just fallen off the bandwagon now. I might as well go hell for leather and eat absolutely everything, and I'll start again tomorrow. And I done that then for a long time. So I was in that cycle of restrict, restrict, restrict all week, and then find myself feeling very out of control, eating all of the foods, like to the point where, like I would be like, I'd have to lie down in child's pose. Like I wouldn't be able to move. I'd be on the bed. I'd have to lie down. I mean, like, had I not been terrified, somebody had told me, like, at one point, that if you made yourself sick, that you would ruin your teeth. So only for I was a bit obsessed about teeth, I reckon I would have tried lots of different other mechanisms to kind of get rid of this food. And in a way, I'm very grateful in a way, because it didn't go down the kind of bulimia route. But the
Yeah.
binge eating was very, challenging. Like I would feel so uncomfortably full. And then the next day wake up and you'd recommit, like, never again, I'm not going to do this again, only to find yourself the week later doing the same thing. And I was in that cycle for years. And like, this was not just through Weight Watchers. I tried everything from the 5-2 diet, the keto diet. Like, there isn't the cabbage soup diet, the 3-day diet. There isn't a diet on the planet that I didn't try. Like, not a diet that I didn't try. And then I suppose I got to the point then kind of I would say I was in my like late 20s when I went back and studied nutrition. And I suppose I thought at the time, well, maybe the reason why I am binge eating is because I just don't know enough about nutrition and I need to learn more about what I quote unquote should be eating, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like thinking I'll just study nutrition and that's just going to get rid of all my problems. And it just, all that done was it just shifted from kind of binge eating into more of a place of orthorexia. So I became quite obsessed with like, again, quote unquote, because I'm not sure if this video has been recorded, so I want people to know that I obviously don't to fall in line with these kind of terms, but like the clean eating, the organic eating, everything had to be like so nutrient dense, perfect. And like, so I fell into that trap, which was another hole entirely, because the binge eating was stressful, but actually to have really, really kind of heightened fear around eating like anything processed, like even a bloody ham and cheese sandwich, that wasn't nice either. It was desperate. It was so distressing, you know. And then that also kind of rippled into like my parenting. So I became like this really uptight, intense, like rigid, so many rigid rules with the kids and with like the grandparents and anyone that was looking after them. I was like, they can only have this, this, and this. And it was just awful, awful. Um, and look at, by the time I qualified then and had my nutrition diploma under my belt, I was still in the same place. I was just now more fearful of foods, but I was still binge eating, because as much as I was clean eating all week, I was still binging out of control at the weekend. But actually, to everybody around me, I had this perfect persona of being like such a healthy eater. I was the person that came to lunch every day with like the perfectly made salad that had bloody, I don't know what in it. And everybody was like, wow, like you're so healthy. Oh, you're so healthy. And little did they know this was such a mask, because behind all of that, I was really obsessed with food. I was stressed to the nines and I was still binge eating, because once I would eat something that was kind of off plan, I would be so riddled with guilt. And so the shame that would come with that and the stress, I would just like nosedive into all of the foods that I was, you know, avoiding. So I suppose really then what was the catalyst for me was to kind of like, I suppose, challenge what was going on, or at least question or be curious about it, was I started to notice that my son, who I had in like I had put all these rules on him as well, the food rules, I noticed he started secret eating. And he was like three or four at the time, you know, he was young. He's my now 11-year-old. And like he, you know, he was binge eating essentially, because he was the child that like you bring him to the party and the parents would be like, oh, he wasn't really playing with other kids, but actually what it was he couldn't leave the sweet table. He would
Yes.
be like, he would just surrounded by the sweet table. He couldn't leave it because he was like, oh my God, all the sweets.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. I'm now finally allowed to eat the sweets. So he would so like he, you know, obviously I started finding wrappers underneath his pillow, underneath the bed. And I mean, all this was doing was like mirroring back to me exactly what I was doing, because I used to go to the petrol station when there'd be nobody with me. And I would go in and buy like 5 or 6 bars or some packets of sweets and crisps. And I would eat it all in one go on the way home, let's say from wherever I was. And I would dump the wrappers, like push it down underneath the other rubbish in the bin, so that if somebody opened it, they wouldn't see it. So it was
Yeah.
all this secret eating that I was doing as well, you know. So then when I realized that my son was doing it, I was like, oh God, this is not good. Like what's going on here? And it really got me to kind of question it. And I was like, and again, I actually wasn't coming from a place of like blaming myself. It was more like, okay, something does need to change, but what needs to change? And it was interesting because I would have discovered, I suppose, intuitive eating in my 20s. But at the time, I was like, no, that's absolute nonsense, because I just can't not diet. Like, I'm just like, I mean, you can't just stop dieting. Like, that was like not an option for me, you know? And I also was never happy with my weight. And the interesting thing, no matter how thin I ever got, no matter how much weight I ever lost, it was never good enough. I never liked what I saw. It didn't matter. I would lose it temporarily, and then the stress of gaining the weight back, and then back to losing it. And I mean, my body image was, you know, on the floor. And I suppose in my 20s, I just wasn't ready. But in my 30s, I suppose there was just this seed. There was just something telling me, like, am I really going to be in this place and living this way when I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s? I just couldn't imagine it. And the truth is I had older people in my life that were still talking about dieting in their like 70s and 80s and going back to the Weight Watchers plan. And I was like, oh no, that this can't be me. There has to be more to life. And that's just ultimately kind of what I felt about it.
I
Um,
I love the fact that you just said there has to be more to life, because this podcast is called More to Life Podcast, and it's
Brilliant.
exactly
Well, there
things
is
like
more to
this.
life, people. There
You just spot on. I didn't even pay you to say that. Carry on, carry on.
and yeah, so like I suppose it just planted the seed, and I was like, right, I'm gonna get the back. I just remembered the intuitive eating. I was like, I'm gonna get back and read this book. So I bought the workbook, bought the book, and I sat down. I started reading it, and I was still totally on the fence. I was like, I'm not sure what's gonna happen here, but here I am reading, and I just started to open up to this idea that I could stop dieting, and it kind of just went from there. And that was a good few years ago, maybe I don't know, like 4 years ago now. And I started then the Instagram page about 3 years ago with my sister, and we just started kind of documenting what we were learning about it, our relationship with food, how it changed, wanted people to know that there is another route to living that's not around restricting and counting calories and counting points and being afraid of food, certain foods. So we really just wanted to share that. So that's kind of in a nutshell what has brought me here today. And I suppose, the good news is that I was binge eating for about 20 years, and I would have never believed that if somebody had said to me that, like, well, it's possible that you will reach a point in your life where binge eating no longer plays a role. And like, from somebody that used to, like, and I mean, like, I've done it all. Like, I have been the person that, when I've had a food in front of me and I get so frenzied and I was like, get this out of here. I would fire it in the bin, and I would like squirt like, washing up liquid on top of it so that I wouldn't eat it. And then I would walk away and then like scramble back and find myself rummaging around trying to find any bit that wasn't covered in fairy liquid. I mean, I've done it all, like that, really out of control.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just really not able to stop. And it was an awful place to be. But I guess the good news is that no longer is in my life now, and it hasn't been for years. And I'm really grateful for that. It's like a whole different world. And not alone did it positively benefit me, but like my relate, like with my kids, like I was able to model for them what it's like to not restrict. And like my now 10-year-old coming 11-year-old that was binge eating, as I was saying, like he's in a really great place with his relationship with food. He's loves all these, we call them growing foods in our house, lots of growing foods, but he loves his fun foods and whatever. And he's a lovely balance of both. And it's amazing to see that.
Yeah. And so he's just so lucky that he has a parent who has seen it, acknowledged it, understood it, and has done something about it. And like,
Yeah.
that's where just so many kids are slipping through the net, like, i.e. me and you, like it wasn't picked up, it wasn't acknowledged. And so therefore we went on and had this kind of like binge eating for years. And it's like, it's so true. Like I went through my journey of recovery, and I thought I had recovered, and I had with loads of things to a certain extent. And then I had my daughter 3 years ago. And when she started going onto foods, and she's, was like snacks and stuff like that, I would notice she'd go to the cupboard and she'd just want all the chocolate. And I remember thinking, I'm freaking out here. And I was like, this is my unhealed bit that is coming back up
Yeah.
to show me that there is more healing to do, because I'm putting my own previous fear like into my child, kind of thing. Like I don't know what I was scared of, but and so a bit like you, I was kind of like trying to stop her from eating all that. And then when I went back and sort of like, I had to just like reprogram myself. I now let her do kind of like what she wants to a certain extent, like, and she's chilled.
Yeah.
She's now she's only 3, but she's now chilled around this food. Whereas before she was like you, she was the kid just eating and eating and eating it. And I can
Yeah.
so see that in my life when I was younger. So you pointed out the bit where you were in hospital and you're building this connection to, like, you know, the yum yum foods, the fun foods. In terms of you growing up with your family though, was there a lack of food? Was there rules around food? Was there no, because were you allowed to eat yum yum foods kind of whenever anyway?
So, like, we didn't grow up in any kind of like food scarcity, food poverty. My mother was an amazing like cook. She would have like been really great at making like just like different dishes. She would have been like not the typical mom, made lovely food. And we didn't have food rules necessarily. But there would have been like, and it was really quite subtle, to be honest. Like, we were really quite lucky. And this is why I say to parents as well that, like, we can only do so much as parents, but our children then will be figuring stuff out in their own way, and they're going to have their own natural wiring, etc. So, we can only do so much. And like, my parents wouldn't have had, like, they would never have kind of said anything around like weight or anything like that. There wasn't much like mention about anything like that growing up. But it would have been things like you'd come in the evening and you'd be starving after school, and instead of there maybe been some snacks ready, the kind of message would have been, no, wait for your dinner, wait for your dinner. And if we did eat something, because we never used to wait, of course we didn't, if we didn't wait, we would have maybe some crackers or toast or whatever it was. And I suppose there might be comments of like small subtle comments of like, oh, you've had enough of that now, or are you going to eat, whatever. Like, it might have been like something just, like saying, you've had enough of that, or whatever it was. And I suppose, like, I wouldn't have said that we were reared in an environment that was kind of in any way critical, really, or shaming of what we were eating. So I think that, yeah, again, just back to that message of like, as parents, we can kind of do so much, but it doesn't always stem from our home environment either. Because I don't believe that it was for me or any of my sisters either. We kind of have spoken about this a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How even like, so the words that they were using, they weren't kind of like toxic wording, compared to what, some people grew up with the language around food, but
Yeah.
we still interpret things like when we're young, we still things log within our mindset and our pathways that actually yeah, we interpret as different things. But it wasn't, what your parents were saying wasn't even, kind of that damaging as such, but it has an effect.
Yes. Totally. It wasn't like, wasn't that bad. It could have been better, right? But it
Yeah,
wasn't that
could have
bad.
been
But I think as
worse.
well, there might have been, yeah, of course, there is. Oh, definitely, there was worse for sure. We were really lucky with our upbringing, really, and I am very grateful to it. But there would have been some comments as well, like from like maybe aunties and stuff, like things like, "Oh, the Crow girls love their food." There's just little comments like that. Insinuating that we kind of like our food, and maybe that we eat more than enough, and then that's kind of how that internalizes the internalized message of, I am too much, or I want too much.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. So you said you went into hospital and then you gained weight when you're in hospital, obviously, because you probably weren't moving very much and you were probably
Yeah.
turning to more fun food. So did that have an effect on you afterwards? What was kind of going on in your head with that sort of messaging to yourself?
Yeah, I definitely think like I felt like when I went back into school that I was kind of like definitely bigger than all my other all of the girls in the class. Like, I would have always felt that. But it's interesting looking back on pictures, I really wasn't. Like, I was marginally bigger than the rest of them, and like, I'm naturally a tall, broad woman now, but like, as a child I actually wasn't. But it's mad how, like, in my head I definitely felt like I was much bigger than my friends in school. um but I don't know. I mean, I was very sporty. So once I kind of got out of hospital and kind of got back, like, I played a lot of sport. I think in a way, like, I probably ended up losing a bit of that weight again afterwards once I kind of became active again. And, that was fine. And it wasn't really until my kind of later teenage years, I think. I was quite old when I had my period. So, like, my body didn't really change much shape very young. I was 16 when I got my period. It was very much older than what most girls were at the time. So when my body started changing around that time, like when I first started menstruation, that's when I think I became more aware of, oh, I don't like that, like, my bum has gotten bigger, that my belly looks bigger, all of these changes that naturally happen, of course. But at the time I was like, there's something wrong with me. And I
Yeah.
didn't have somebody to tell me, no, your body is meant to change during this time. You're meant to actually, you know, gain weight at this time. It's not something wrong. You're not doing
Yeah.
anything wrong. That's what's meant to happen. And you know, so I suppose it would probably panic from my end. And then that's what probably, you know, when I was whatever 17, that I kind of started Weight Watchers.
Yeah. And that's when once you start that diet cycle, you literally enter dark chaos, don't you? Like it is so hard to get out of. Like, and I've rarely met, in fact, working with hundreds of people, I don't think I've ever met anyone who said, I did 1 or 2, 3 diets and figured out it wasn't for me and just stopped dieting and went back to eating normally. Like, I don't even think I've ever heard that from somebody. Like,
No.
once you start, in order to stop, you have to really have that realization, something's not right here. Like, I'm going to have to do the emotional work and like the whole lot, and I'm going to have to really make changes. Like, you get so stuck into it, and then dieting so quickly makes you distrust any sort of like makes you distrust yourself so much. Like, it makes you feel like you don't know how to eat, or you don't know what to eat, or if I
Yeah.
do eat that this is going to happen. And you're such an advocate of intuitive eating. I just think it's absolutely amazing. Have you had clients who have said to you, I'm so scared of intuitive eating because if I just let go of my rules, I'm just going to eat everything?
Oh, of course. I think that's the
Yeah.
number one fear that I hear, right? Yeah. I'm sure you do too, is that like there's such, as you mentioned, that mistrust in our bodies, and that like we're, you know, somehow like going to be always kind of chaotic, out of control eaters if we don't have rules in place. And then the irony of it is as we know, right, is when we let go of the rules and find that things balance out, it's like, oh my God, the feeling, the empowerment of being able to eat in a way that feels good. And you're like, oh my God, so I didn't just want to eat chocolate for breakfast, dinner, and tea for every single day for the rest of my life. Because of course you didn't. You'd be sick of doing that after 2 days, you
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
like most people just are thinking, no, if I let go of the rules, I'll, well, actually, the other one I get is, if I let go of the rules, I'm going to gain weight.
Yes. Yes.
That's I think ultimately what's at the root of, like, if people are fearful, what I say to people is, would you be worried about whether you would eat all of these fun foods? Would you be worried about them if if you were guaranteed that they would have no impact on your weight, or that your weight wouldn't change? And usually people's answer is no, that they wouldn't really care. So then the reality of it is that actually the root of that fear, that I'll be out of control eating XYZ forevermore, is really that I'm afraid I'm going to gain weight,
Yeah.
and I'm
That
not ready for that change.
that was what it was for me. I remember sitting there one day thinking, right, this has got to stop, and I'm gonna have to let go of these food rules. I've got to go down this journey. And I remember Googling like retreats that I could go to for like 2 weeks just so I could disappear, gain this weight, and then just try and like, sort it out. And like, obviously I didn't just run away for 2 weeks. I actually realized quite quickly these biggest fears weren't going to happen. But and just the eating everything, and after a day of it, like, because the difference between binging against your will and binging like in a controlled manner sort of thing is like, I'm gonna let go of all the rules, I'm gonna get all this yum food in my house, and actually allowing yourself to binge if that's what happens. It's like two completely different things. And so that was my biggest fear, like, actually, oh my gosh, like, what is going to happen? But like I said, once I got that food in, and I was kind of like, binge if you want to, it's there if you want to. It just doesn't, it's taken away all the control from it.
Oh my God, totally. And it's like, it's pretty radical. Like, it's life changing that, you know, there was times where like I could not have a morsel of chocolate left in the house. I couldn't imagine. And I was actually just looking at it earlier, and I was like, oh, I must do a story on Instagram about this, because like I went to Barcelona with friends in January, and I bought a Toblerone. I love a Toblerone. And I was just about to go into the press earlier on, and I realized it's still there. It's half eaten, like the Toblerone from January. It's now April. Now, like, it's not that I'm saying that's a good thing that I didn't eat it, right? That's not what I'm saying. And that's not the goal. But obviously, I ate it anytime I wanted a bit of it. And it just so happens that I'm not all consumed about it. I'm not thinking about it all the time. but I couldn't have had a Toblerone bar in my press for, sorry, we say press, is it
Yes,
cupboard?
yeah, yeah, I love it.
So we couldn't have had it in the press for 4 months. Are you joking? I wouldn't have been able to have it in the press for 4 hours,
So, yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So it's a total different, but I think that again, you don't know what that actually feels like until you have the courage and the curiosity and the hope that actually I do deserve a better life, and I need to jump into this because I need to lean into this discomfort, this fear, because otherwise it's not until you allow the foods. You can't just tell yourself you're allowed the foods, right? You can't, it's not an intellectual process. You
yeah,
can't say to yourself, oh, I'm allowed to eat whatever I want, but then not actually have the foods and eat them.
yeah.
You have to eat
Too
them.
smart.
Yeah, yeah. Or we're too. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can't fool your own body.
Yeah. That was something as well as a big realization. I keep trying to outsmart my body and it's not working. Um,
No.
so just going back to the point where you said you binged it for all these many years, etc., and now that doesn't play a part in your life. Like I know that there are so many people listening thinking, but how like how have you done that? And I think people, they understand now actually the restriction is contributing to the binging and stuff, but like what would you say was your several biggest game changers for you in terms of stopping the binge eating?
So I suppose, well, definitely obviously stopping the dieting. That had to
Yeah.
stop. That's the first step. So obviously the unconditional permission to eat. What was probably the biggest game changer was how I decided to treat myself and speak to myself moving forward. So it really, the self-compassion is like, it's the foundation in my mind. It's like the cornerstone of progressing forward, because there's going to be times where you don't eat in a way that feels good. But if there's any room or space where you allow kind of self-criticism and self-hate or berating yourself, that literally fuels more of that you end up probably needing more food to soothe. And so it's all of this vicious cycle. So actually choosing to kind of challenge that and speak to yourself in a way that you would speak to a loved one, how you would speak to a friend. So like I really began to work on that self-talk and, literally being my own best friend. And most of us don't speak to ourselves like we would dream of speaking to somebody that we love. So
Mm.
that was really, really such a big step forward for me. And not just with food. Like I've done it with everything, like my marriage, with my parenting, with my work, with my family, whatever it is in life. I've just, really adapted this kind of self-compassionate approach that whatever is going on, it's like, how can I meet that with kindness? Even if I don't like what's showing up, even if I don't like how I'm maybe behaving at times, because like, I'm a parent of four. They drive me mad sometimes. I do things that I'm not proud of. I might lose my temper. I might shout. I might get cross. I might be impatient. And I don't behave in ways that I'm really super proud of. But like, do I serve them or me by beating myself up? I'm like, no, right, okay, what's going on here? Am I tired? Have I not just been, I didn't get a good night's sleep last night? Am I eating in a way that feels good? Did I get out in fresh air today? I think that probably brings me into the next point, is that I started to look at like all of the ways in which I can kind of on a day-to-day basis look after my own needs. So instead of looking to other people to kind of meet my needs for me, it's my responsibility to do what I need to do in order to stay well. And I think that like, no, so many of us in like now have like, it's like we're kind of conditioned to believe in some way that if you have needs that you are selfish, or if you have needs that like, other things should probably take priority. But actually, no, like I'm very passionate around, particularly to share with other mothers, make sure you look after you first. Because, they look at the age old, metaphor of like, the oxygen mask in the plane, like put yours on first. Because if you don't have that, you won't be able to give it to them and you won't be able to model it for them. So like there's things that I do like every day, and I think that all did tie into healing my relationship with food. So like it was like starting a practice like committing to journaling in the morning for like 5 or 10 minutes, being able to do some yoga before the kids get up in the morning, just to get that time in for me to get a bit of a stretch in. So it was really looking at different kind of really probably lifestyle changes, like different behaviors, self-care practices that on the daily kind of served me to look after myself better. And really, I was able to be able to meet my needs in other ways that had nothing to do with food. And
Yeah.
that's really the game changer, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the game changer. And that self-compassion created a higher sense of feeling of self-worth for you, which even
Yes,
like, even if you are sat here now thinking, I can't ditch the dieting yet, I'm still too in it, like
that's
even
okay.
just do the self-compassion, because like
Yeah,
ultimately, again, like I don't think I've really ever met someone who had difficult relationship with food that hasn't also got a form of an amount of low self-worth. So even if you can just raise your self-worth through like what you're talking about, the self-compassion,
yeah,
affirmations, the journaling, like it will be working behind the scenes. You might not see it. It's not like a conscious like thing, but subconsciously, like it is, that you're going to be making progress. So even like just focus
yes.
on that for a while. And
Oh,
then
it's amazing.
yeah, that's
Because there's always going to be something that you would benefit from kind of drawing on some self-compassion. That's always going to benefit. And like you said, it's okay if you're not eating in a way that feels good right now. Okay. If you're not ready to ditch dieting, if you're afraid that you'll gain weight, if you have all of these things going on, that's okay. How can you meet that as that compassionate friend and be like, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, it's okay.
yeah,
And when you do that, that it's really interesting what can happen. It's like another door can open when you kind of it's like you're building that sense of self-trust as well. You're not kind of like bashing yourself over the head because you're finding it hard to give up the dieting. Like of course people find it hard to give up the dieting. It's really bloody hard.
yeah.
So to really meet it with kindness and compassion, I think is everything.
Yeah, it is everything, like you said, and it works on everything. Just got a couple more questions. So, with your relationship to food over the years, what did you notice was your biggest triggers? And not necessarily, I mean, like emotional triggers. So, not necessarily like, having food in front and then being triggered, but like relationships to people or things, or like, what was your kind of like your biggest emotional triggers?
Definitely, I'm like, I would have found that like if I was quite anxious or off center about stuff, so like if there was a lot of pressure in the background anywhere, whether that was work, whether that was like my marriage, obviously my intimate relationship, or whether that was with my sisters, or if there's ever anything that goes on that's kind of raises the amount of stress that I experience, I am much more likely to go like to either, which I still do. I mean, I still soothe with food. It's not like that ever goes away. I mean, that's not the goal, anyways. I mean, it's normal to use food to soothe. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm kind of the type of person that like I don't like we can use food obviously for lots of different reasons, whether that's boredom, loneliness, sadness, even happiness. We're happy. Some people use food. For me, it would have been like anxiety. If I felt like that edginess in my nervous system where I just couldn't sit with that uncomfortable, like heightened energy and in my body, I couldn't sit with that. I had real difficulty sitting with that, and I would need to just like numb it out. I would need to shove that down. So I
yes.
would, yeah, use food for that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's probably one of mine as well. Like if I heard something about someone else that was really sad, it would have been like, and you're on edge or something, it would be that instant. And yeah, I think like it's really good that you just pointed out that like, you do still use food to soothe and in a, to a
yeah,
certain way. So my other question to you is, the voice, like the disordered eating voice, the voice in our head that says, eat it, don't, what for you was, eat it, don't eat it. What have you done? Da, da, da. Do you still hear this voice? Do you ever get that feeling of like, oh, that's the disordered eating trying to creep back up here? Or no?
Well, I would say that I don't hear the disordered eating voice very loudly, or if ever anymore, which I'm really grateful for. But I do still have that voice when it comes to my body image. So I definitely still have some challenging body image moments, you know. I don't look in the mirror every day and love what I see. You know, there's days where I'm quite content, and I don't believe that you have to love what you see in order to care for it and to respect it. So I choose on the daily. I choose, like, it's literally a recommitment to myself every day, you know, regardless of what I look like. I deserve to be cared for, and I deserve to respect my body and all this kind of thing, all this kind of stuff. But from time to time, I will notice, particularly right before my period, I find the body image just goes whoop, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh my God, like, you need to lose weight, and all these thoughts
yeah,
come in going, maybe you just need to go on, like, just try a diet. You know, you'll have you'll have these little thoughts that will crop in, you know, and but it's funny, I kind of laugh at them thoughts now. It's really funny. Like, I suppose I have this little thing with my sister, where, like, when we're having like a body image moment, or we're just like, and again, I'm really lucky that that's moments, because it doesn't last a day or 2 days or 10 days for me anymore. It would have at one point in the early
yeah,
days, right? It used to last for really long, but now it's like literally moments. And, you know, I might just text my sister and we have a little bit of a joke, and, you know, look, it's not going to be how everybody deals with it, but it just seems to, for me, the humor just seems to dissolve this was the emotion behind it. So, like, Gillian will text me, or I'll text her and be like, I'm thinking of joining Weight Watchers on Thursday. Do you want to join? And
yeah,
she's just like, you know, the two of us laugh, because when we think about the madness that was these days that we used to go to these clubs and the things that we used to do, like, it's just, we're so lucky now we can look back and kind of, and I don't want that to sound like I'm minimizing, like, there might be people listening to this that are still going to
yeah.
swimming clubs, and
No,
I'm not in any way pulling the piss out of that at all, because I know what
yeah,
it's like. But for me, it's like, I nearly kind of remind myself, this is ludicrous. This is ludicrous, because it was so awful for me. Like, why would I ever go back to that? Like, it's just mad. So that it just kind of shoots me into a place of, oh yeah, there we go. There are the mad thoughts. And look at,
yeah,
going back to that life of dieting would be madness for me. So I just find the humor helps to dissolve it. That's just one way that I approach it. It might not be everybody's way, but that's okay. But yeah, so I'm kind of lucky, like, I don't have like massive disordered thoughts or that voice anymore around food, but it does come in around body image.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think, and that is like healing a relationship with food. It can often be like the first step, and then moving on to the body is, you know, it's so ingrained in us. Like, look at the world we live in. Like, to remove any of that, you know, society's standards and how we've all grown up, like, you'd have to change the world around us in order to not see any messaging, which would be to not, like, you know, trigger any of those emotions in
Yeah.
our head and stuff. So I think, yeah, you can, like, your approach is brilliant. It's like, well, I personally think, you know, that would work for me as well. Just we're at a stage now where we can look back and kind of laugh about it. And like, for other people listening who may be halfway there, or some that are just like, oh my gosh, like, this is it's so serious for me right now. Like, for us both, certainly I can speak for myself, it was so serious for me too. But like,
Oh
you
yeah.
can get to a point where you look back and think, how did I even do that to myself? Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to keep up with what I used to do now, not with the kids and work and everything. Like, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed like I used to. Just wouldn't happen.
Oh my, oh my God, no way. Because, like, I used to spend so long in the morning planning out all my points for the day and how I was going to minimize them and how I was going to, you know, look at it. It was just crazy. And, you know, again, yeah, you're so right, because there could be people listening to this that are like still in the thick of it. And it's certainly not funny when you're in the thick of it. Like, and I really can relate to that. It was just
Yeah.
awful all the time, you know, with food and body. So just really to kind of have compassion and kind of empathy for people that might be listening that are at that place. But I think hopefully also to inspire to say, you know, when you do this work, you too will likely look back and
Yes.
reflect on some of the behaviors that you were engaging in, and actually have that same, like, oh my God, what was that? Like, how, gee, I could never imagine a life like that now. So
Wow.
that's so possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You've been an absolute pleasure. Can you just let everyone know where they can find you on your social media, or, you know, what's your sort of platforms?
Yeah, so I'm on social media. So Instagram is at intuitive.eating.ireland. And then our website is www.intuitiveeatinghub.com.
Amazing. I also love your accent. I could listen to
Stop.
an Irish accent all day.
Oh, stop. It's funny. I've always had a complex. My accent is very country now. I'm very country. So I would
Oh,
have been flagged a lot as like a bugger. That's so when people say they like my accent, I'm like, what?
oh, we love it. I absolutely love it. Me and my friends, we all love it. We've just come back from Tenerife and we spent all the 3 nights in the Irish bar listening to the Irish singers.
Uh,
It was lovely. But thank you so much, my lovely, and I will speak to
oh,
you
thanks for
soon.
having me.
Cheers. Bye.